Welcome to Dead Headspace, now a part of the Silver Shamrock Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, and all other major platforms, which now includes YouTube. That's right, you can now watch your favorite episodes, including this one. Just search for Dead Headspace. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today, we're joined by author, screenwriter, producer, and publisher, Richard Chizmar. Say hello, Richard.
Hey, everybody.
And before we jump into the baseline question, now, I know that you are a Baltimore Ravens fan, the only team to be named after the Godfather of Horror's poem, The Raven. Curious what you think about Brady, man. I'm really curious if you're into this.
I loathed. Trust me, I there was no one who despised Brady more than me when he was with the Patriots. My hate has dulled. I will begrudgingly admit that he is the best to play that position. What he did this year is pretty amazing. But I still think MVP of that game should have been the defense, especially their defensive line. They were amazing. And I had a feeling it was going to happen. I told some friends before the game, I said, Tampa's got the best defensive line and the best offensive line, and that scares me. You got a team down if both of those are playing well.
Sue should have, Sue could have had the argument for getting that too, man. But you know what? Just had to pick your brain on that. Now let's jump to what got you into horror.
Oh, you know what? Right from the beginning, I was attracted to that. I mean, the earliest memories I have of being scared are like probably a lot of people's, probably similar to a lot of people, the Wizard of Oz, the witch, those damn monkeys, the haunted forest. I remember just really digging that, but at the same time being terrified. Chi Bang Bang, man, that kidnapper with the net. Oh my God, I had nightmares, but at the same time, anytime it was on television, I had to watch it. So yeah, I was just naturally attracted to that. And even, I remember I grew up in a big family. I'm the youngest of 5, and everyone in the family was a reader to a pretty decent extent. And so library trips were a regular thing. And even in the beginning, I remember, just kind of keying in on the scary stuff, Halloween, books for kids and that kind of thing. And then just grew up through, it kind of grew through there. Twilight Zone comics, the horror comics, the Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And then at some point pretty early on, I discovered King, and that kind of was the springboard. But yeah, I was the kid who, would be outside on Saturday playing wiffle ball or throwing rocks at my friends. And then as soon as noon came on, I had to run in on Saturdays to watch Creature double feature. And then I'd go out as soon as that was done. So yeah, I've been a weirdo pretty much from the start.
Brennan, why don't you take over?
Yeah.
You're in good company.
I figured.
I love that mix of media too. You had the pulled the horror out of mainstream movies, the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Wizard of Oz, kind of digging into not necessarily the hopeful parts, the musical parts, but the scary parts. I think it takes a certain mindset to watch a cinematic classic like The Wizard of Oz and say it's the damn monkeys that stick with me.
Yeah, no, I mean those were the things that haunted me, and I remember even watching my older brother is a big fan of the Abbott and Costello movies, and I even remember those, the ones Meets the Mummy, Meet Frankenstein, all those. I wasn't there for the laughs. I was there for to be scared right along with them. So yeah, like I said, for whatever reason, I just I came out that way.
I love Abbott and Costello. Big fan of those guys. You know what, man? It's because of those monster mashups where I kind of like them more than the Stooges, and I never got big into the Marx Brothers. I got into what's his name, Buster Keaton. I liked him, old silent film guys. But yeah, the Abbott and Costello films, they're so funny.
They really are. They really are. And you know what? When you're a kid, they're pretty scary too. Some of those.
Yeah. Before we continue, I want to tell you that. I'll word it how he said it. Tell Richard, that old Ron said howdy. For those that don't know who Ron is, it's Ronald Kelly.
I'm Kelly. I was gonna say you didn't even have to say the last name. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've known Ron forever. He was in the magazine from the very beginning. I was there when he sold his first book to Zebra, Hindsight, and I was bummed out when he quit, writing for a while, and elated when he came back. And I think probably about a month ago, he put some photos of some old promotional bookmarks of his on social media, and I'm like, son of a bitch, I still have those.
I saw those. Yeah, I follow him on Facebook, and yeah, we talk about him every now. Well, we talk about him probably a lot. I don't keep track, but yeah, he's someone that we're just talking about because we love the guy and his books, but we kind of hope that he gets this new following, and it sounds like he is. It sounds like he's getting a rekindling of that readership, and fair enough to say maybe it's even more addicting than when he was younger because now he can talk to them a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. What's funny is I tell people all the time how different it was back then, and I feel like the old guy saying, "Get out of my yard." But he was there in the heyday with me of all the small press. So you could get your name out there by selling a bunch of your short stories to a bunch of the different small press magazines, the semi pros like Horror Show and then the pros like Night Cry and Twilight Zone, and then anthology market was just booming. So yeah, Ron was out there a lot, but you're right. There was no social media. You couldn't put a face or a voice with the name. And yeah, he looks like he's having fun. I saw a post of his recently where he talked about someone said something about he needed to start writing novels again. He's like, "No, I'm having a good time writing short stories." And I was just like, you know what, right on. Just whatever keeps you at the typewriter. And he's such a good storyteller. So Ron can do whatever he wants. And in today's market where the flip side of what it was, there's not 6 or 7 dozen magazines floating around out there. There's not a bunch of pro ones out there, but instead you have the internet and you have a way to reach these people yourselves. And that's the cool thing. So a storyteller as good as him, he'll be fine. I think he'll gain that audience, and like you said, and then some.
The Essential Six stuff was our first introduction to him, and for that other podcast I mentioned of Burying the Dead, we're going to be reading Fear next by him and talking about that with Ken McKinley. So we're excited for that. That'll be my first time reading Fear.
Okay. Good book. Very good.
I know you, James Newman, Brian Keene, a bunch of other guys that Brian and I look up to all talk highly of that book. So I got high expectations.
Yeah. No, I'm a big Ronald Kelly fan, so I like everything he does. That's the cool thing. He's an old-fashioned storyteller, which he'll tell you. So I like the really traditional stuff, the Southern fried stuff, but then he can write some just twisted, nasty stuff that makes you want to look at him and say, "Ron, what's wrong with you? You're supposed to be a good Tennessee boy." But just a very talented guy.
Now, the more I talk, sorry for cutting you off, Brian. It looked like you were about to ask something, but his answer just got me thinking. The more people we talk to, and I'm not saying it's a generational thing, but there's no hesitation with guys like you, Joe or Lansdale, even guys like Abino or Keene, where you're just going to be like, "This is my story," and I mean, you're going to like it or not. And nowadays, and I'm not knocking it, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but nowadays, newer writers are hesitant at times to say, if they were to do a Jack Ketchum type book, you might catch a lot of guff for that. But you look at all the classics like The Exorcist or Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, and they are good. They're gut wrenching. And I'm curious if you have any comment on that. I don't really have a question, but
honestly, I think it's I think that kind of mindset of has existed all along. It's just, I think it comes down to the individual writer's confidence. Because when I was starting out, and certainly in those first however many years, probably more than it should have been, speaking for myself, I did care what people thought. Now, I didn't care I wanted them to like it. Let's put it that way. And somebody could easily say, well, every writer wants that, and of course you do. I think any writer at any stage of the game, whether you're Ronald Kelly or a newcomer or you're Steve King, yeah, you write it, you put it out there, you want people to like it and enjoy it. But at some point, it does become, and it sounds a little cliche, but at some point it does become more about you finding satisfaction in the story, you being happy with the story. I know when I'm finished with the story, I get to the point, whether it's a book or a novella or a short story or a script, where I get to that point where, and it's not just because I'm sick of it, which is certainly the case sometimes, but I get to that point where I'm like, okay, this story's done. I'm pleased with it. Hopefully you guys are also, but guess what? If you're not, tough shit, because I'm done with it. I'm not going back in again. And again, it's not ego, it's not laziness. It's just, I think once you get that certain level of confidence and self-belief, and you're writing about things that are important to you, and that's certainly why it didn't apply to me in the beginning, because I was writing I was writing whatever came to mind, whatever I thought would sell, what a lot of newer writers do. And that's, I've told people that over and over again. Once I started writing what was really important to me, no matter how small a scope of a story or how twisty of a plot, it didn't matter. Once I started writing about things that mattered to me, that's when I kind of found my voice and started finding a readership.
And I think that's so important, just with the hours that you invest in creating a story. Let's say it's something novel length, that's hundreds and hundreds of hours of creating, of editing. And if you're specifically trying to cater it towards an audience and not doing something that you're interested in, you're going to grow to dislike it. You're going to kind of put your own voice in there anyway. It's so necessary to just kind of do what you want to do with it, to tell the story you want to read. That age-old adage of write the story that you want to read. Well, of course, because you're going to get bored to tears, and you're going to criticize your own work otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, that's exactly right. And I mean, I always kind of liken it to going to a party, and some people are really good at small talk and kind of faking their way through. I suck at it. You're going to know right away if there's somebody there who's full of himself, or, a bully or whatever, he's going to know in a hurry. I'm just like, I don't, I kind of just don't do that. I can't, and I never have. And the same thing applies to writing. It's just like, I can't pretend. So I'd be like the worst person to, to get, there's been opportunities where, you can make a decent amount of money, but you're writing about X or Y. And for me, I can't do it, because I know what would happen. I'd cash the check, be all excited, and then I'd sit down to write about X and Y, this movie character or this, shared world thing. And I'd get 10 pages in and be like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. But other writers, and it doesn't, I'm not saying, I'm not, that's not me looking down on like tie-ins and things like that. It's just a different mindset. And you know what, if I could, I would, because it'd be nice to bank some of those checks, but I've just never been able to.
Now, was there any this seems like a stupid question. I feel bad for asking it, but is there any aspect of that at all playing in Castle Rock with the original Gwendy story, or was it because you got to kind of create the lore and just play in that town?
Yeah, no, because and it's interesting, because people have asked me, they're like, well, could you write in a and they, they pick a different author who they know I really respect. Could I write in a Joe Lansdale world? You know what? I couldn't. As much as I'd love to write a Happen Leonard story with Joe, that's like, oh my God, that'd be so much fun. But I couldn't do it, because I've read those. I've read everything Joe's written. I've loved it to varying degrees, but I've yet to read something from Lansdale that I dislike. I've learned a lot from him, especially about dialogue and kind of taking some chances. And with Joe, sometimes the reader has to catch up a little bit because of just the way he tells a story. He doesn't give a damn if it's not cookie cutter. It's not always A to B to C. Sometimes he skips B and C and goes right to D. But that's how people are. Life's not neat, and conversations aren't always neat and orderly. And that's something I've learned from him. But I couldn't write a Happen Leonard story with him. number one, I haven't retained enough of the knowledge of the characters. But if, I pick up his new book and 10 pages in, I'm like, yeah, they're like old friends again. But whereas with Steve, because I grew up reading him right from the very beginning of kind of being a young adult, and I've reread the books, and I've just, I've been immersed in that Stephen King universe for so long that when that opportunity came, which was just mind blowing in itself. Yeah. I mean, but so to answer your question, no, not at all. It was, I experienced none of that. I just really experienced in really short order the elation of being asked and having the opportunity to do that. And then very quickly right after that, just being completely terrified because I had the opportunity to do that. And I realized, oh shit, now what? So that's about as truthful of a description as I can give. In one weekend, I went from just being so excited, not telling anybody, and then finally telling my wife and kids, to sitting down and going, I can't do this. I 100% can't do this. And then starting to write and realizing, you know what, I can do this, So yeah, no, it's actually a good question because, people have kind of tiptoed around that before, like, Rich, aren't you're just playing in Steve's sandbox. And I'm like, yes, I absolutely am. He invited me in and I've been able to hang and do it through 3 books now. So I'm a lucky guy in that regard.
How did that relationship start?
I sent up to Steve's office in Bangor right from the very beginning, issue number 1 of Cemetery Dance. So way back in December of '88, sent up a copy, dear Mr. King, hope you like it. You're the reason I'm doing this, all the gooey stuff. And when issue 2 came out the next summer, I sent that up. I sent up letters, if you would ever send us a short story or, the whole thing that you do when you're 22 and too young to be, too dumb to be scared and all that. And then at some point, pretty early on, his assistant, who back then was a really nice lady named Shirley, she sent me back a letter, just saying Steve appreciated it. And the very first thing I really asked him was, other than I'm sure I asked for stories, but I asked if he would give us a promotional blurb for the magazine since she said he liked it. And he did right away, which was wonderful. And then I guess year 3, like in '91, he sent us a copy of Chattery Teeth, an original short story to publish. And our relationship just kind of grew from there. I think it was like 10 years later, he asked us to do From a Buick 8. So that was the first book. And then, we did, multiple other books after that. And then at some point, the business relationship just kind of turned into a friendship because we were emailing about business stuff and then we were emailing about personal stuff. And it was a strange thing to look up one day and realize that, I'm texting kind of my childhood hero and my literary hero, about a Red Sox Orioles game and giving him shit and he's giving me shit right back. And it's just like, yeah, this is really happening. This is kind of cool.
Yeah, you're in a very unique situation. From outside looking in, I mean, you're friends with him, you publish him, you write with him. Writing with him alone, that's a small camp to be in. It's his son, Peter Straub. Who else?
Stuart Onan. Yeah, it's really just Stuart Onan with the baseball book, and they did a novella together. And then both sons and Peter.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I know that because there's been enough times when I'm like, okay, what doesn't belong in this group? And I go down and then there's my name and people are always very kind. No, Rich, you do. And I'm like, well, you know what? Enough people like Gwendy that I kind of feel like that now, but still for quite a while. And still, even now, there are those days where I'm like, okay, what doesn't fit in this picture? So yeah, very, very fortunate and grateful to him that he dug my stuff enough to trust me to do that.
I hear imposter syndrome all the time, and I think it's fair to say anyone in your position would absolutely feel it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I mean, I definitely felt it that weekend, like I described my emotions. And then it was that Monday, because this all went down on a Friday where he sent me the manuscript and we kind of emailed about it on a Thursday. And so that weekend was pretty it was just like a roller coaster ride. It was alternating between just happiness and being, wanting to puke. So Monday, yeah, when I finally, sat at the laptop and really started writing about, it happened pretty quickly. It was like a half an hour in, and that was all gone. I was like, okay, I'm in Castle Rock. I know this chick. I know the town. What I don't know, Bev Vincent will save me from myself because I'll send it to him to make sure I didn't make mistakes. And from that point, and then I remember I finished a big chunk, like 10,000 words in about 2.5 days. And I remember thinking, if I sit there and I start to go over this, I'm never going to send it to him. I'm going to chicken out. So I just loaded it up and sent it. And I told him, I said, hey, this is a bit more than a first pass, but not much. So I'm going to let you kind of read it raw so that otherwise you won't read it at all. And because I know me. And fortunately, it was positive response, and he, batted it back to me with some more words on it, and then I did it to him, and we just we had fun. That was the key. And I believe that's why there's been further additional books is because I think Steve had fun doing it too.
So how was the process on Magic Feather different?
You know what? Completely, because and I've told this story a few times, and I'm going to continue to tell it. And I always say there are people out there waiting for me to slip up and tell this story differently. And I'm like, it's not going to happen because this is really how it happened. I had a dream. When Button Box came out, people asked, will there be a sequel? Will there be more stories of Gwendy? And Steve's very politically correct answer was always, well, I'm not saying yes to a sequel, but I'm not saying no either. And I thought, that's Steve, because he's very kind and gracious, but he'll do what he wants because he's a busy man. His schedule, is a mess, and he gets pulled in 50 million different directions. So I certainly was never going to ask him. But at some point I had a dream, and I woke up that next morning earlier than usual, and I sent him a quick email that said, I think I know what Gwendy's been doing. I think and I'm not a real political person, so it was even more bizarre, but I'm sure it was because of what had been in the news recently and all that. And I just said, what if Gwendy is a newly elected member of Congress and she walks in her office one day and there's the Button Box. It's back after all these years. And he wrote me back, and I went back to sleep because I remember I was up early. And when I woke up, I had an email waiting, and he said, that is a brilliant idea. I'm going to be busy for the foreseeable future with Holly Gibney, but you should write it. And I thought, okay, that's cool. But I also, in my ultimate wisdom, I thought he meant you should write the first draft because I'm going to be busy, and then I'll come back and write the next draft, and then we'll do what we did the first time. We'll make it, kind of one voice and have a lot of fun. So yeah, that's an honest description of how it was born. And what my idea was all along was that I was going to write this, longer piece, kind of like a short novel or a long novella, and he was going to come back and make me look, brilliant. I never would have. I brought Castle Rock, the town, back, after Needful Things, where half the town blew up and burned down. I kind of brought it back and referenced that. I brought back the sheriff. I never would have done all that. I tell people all the time I would not have had big enough cojones to do that if I didn't think Steve was going to put his own fingerprints on it. But when I sent him the manuscript when I was finished, he read it and essentially just said, "Nah, Rich, this is done." Because he's like, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is you get to keep all the money, and the bad news is because my email to him flat out said, take your time. I don't know what you're working on right now, but take as much time as you need. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do to the story." So, yeah, that's how it happened, and I still look back and think I guess that's the only way it would have happened.
I think that's so interesting that you were able to write a draft of that story. You were able to kind of have a freedom in that story because you thought there was a safety net there when it turns out it was just painted on the floor. You'd have gone splat if
well, that's what I said I never would have done it if I knew that I didn't have a parachute on my back.
Yep.
Oh no. it would have been number one. It would have been a completely different story, and I don't even know. You talk, I said playing in his sandbox. There would have been a handful of emails to him along the way saying, "Steve, are you sure?" And instead, it never happened. I just sat down. In 6 weeks, it flowed out of me, and I remember being surprised that it all came out that quickly, and I sent it to him. And then I just remember being doubly surprised when he was like, "No, Rich, this one's all you. If you want me to, I'll edit it." And I was like, "Yes, please." So yeah, that was another unique experience, and I look back at that and think, yeah, no parachute. Like you said, if I had known that, forget it.
That's really cool. Now, I know you tend to kind of play it close to the chest, but is there anything you can tell us about book 3?
It's longer. It's it's a legit short novel. It's trying to think, 300 something pages. This one was Steve's idea. He came to me, and I got a couple. We text a lot, but it's usually not about work. It's usually about what we're reading or a movie we just saw, or he'll send me a trailer, or baseball, and now football once in a while. He's a Bucks fan now, of course. But or it's about family or dogs. It's just it's just normal, regular life stuff. But this time I got a text about Gwendy, and then all of a sudden he said, "What if this and what if that?" And I was like, "Uh-oh." And so this time I was very clear. I said, I wrote him back what I thought about it, added a few little possibilities myself, and I said, "Are you going to write this one with me? Are you going to write it by yourself?" Something like that. And he said, "No." He said, this happened over the summer, and I remember he said, by September I should be able to dig in. And instead, it was like the second week of August, he started texting again. And then by September, I already had the first chunk of the book, and we were going back and forth. So yeah, this I can tell you, this time was his idea. We wrote it the same way we wrote the first one, which we just traded. We traded longer sections of page count, and because it was a longer, more involved piece. We in the first one we had complete freedom to rewrite each other. And we did a sentence here, paragraph there. Yes, even I was dumb enough to say, "Steve, I think this works better like this." But with this latest one, we really kind of dug in, and without trying to blend it, it's just kind of the way it works, because certain things had to be changed in order for the next section to work. And it was just a lot of fun. I mean, I remember texting him and saying, if every collaboration is like this, no wonder. People should do this. It's good for the soul, because it was almost like this little it was almost just like this challenging exercise where he wrote what he wrote, and we weren't trying to write each other into corners or anything like that, but we also, beyond a really broad description, we didn't tell each other what we were doing. So that was cool. It was like, okay, how am I going to pick up from where he, the world's greatest storyteller just left the story, and go in a way that is, organic to the story, and pushes the narrative, and also doesn't make him, vomit when he opens my section of the manuscript. So it was cool that way, So yeah, I can tell you it's longer. We had a blast. I can tell you part of it takes place in Castle Rock again, but we also go to Derry, which I know will make people happy.
Yeah.
And we still haven't. We have a cover, but we're not ready to announce it yet. We're still dealing with the CD will do the hardcover first, and then Gallery Simon Schuster will come and do a paperback after, and audio and all that. So, but pub date will be early next year. They don't want to have 3 Stephen King books in the same year, which is understandable. So
why don't you do Richard Bachman?
Yeah. So it'll probably be about a year from right now, early February, something like that.
Nice.
That's cool. I'm glad to hear you guys are working together, again, least of all, because Stephen is involved, but also because I don't think that, given what you told us about book 2, where you wrote it in kind of a fearless way because you thought you had that parachute on, well, this time that the parachute's full of silverware. So
yeah, exactly.
It's good that you have that.
Yeah, the difference with what's funny is the difference with this is, and you'll know it when you get the book. or when you read I'm trying to think if we give it away in the promo copy. Yeah, I think we give a certain amount of the plot away as usual, but because of what Steve's idea was for this book and where it takes place and how it takes place, it was still super. I kind of had no choice but to be fearless because because in the beginning there was nothing but fear. I remember thinking, oh, this is such an awesome scenario. Steve, I'm back. I'm writing. Steve King's in with me. It's his idea. It's a great idea, and it's the hardest effing idea to. Instead of it being a very down homey, like the story takes place in Castle Rock, and we're going to the park again, and we're going to go to the coin dealer and all that. It was not familiar, and like I said, I'm kind of rambling, but when you get the plot of the book, you'll understand what I mean. It's not familiar ground, even though it's Castle Rock and Derry.
That's more intriguing.
Yeah, chunks of the book take place there, but it's. We touch on a lot of the Stephen King universe in this book, a lot of different places, a lot of different themes, but just the physical setting made it really unique to anything I had never done. Nothing, I've never done anything like it. So in that regard, I do remember in that first week just going, oh my God, there's the elation again. We're back again. The team's back together again. But holy shit, Steve, really? We had to go this way? But once I got dirty, got my hands dirty, it was fine. It was just terrifying a little bit. So.
I don't know what to say, but that sounds really intriguing. If this is new for you, well, it's gonna definitely be new for the reader.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the neat thing is like I said, the physical setting is very different than what he's done and what I've done. But you have a lot of Castle Rock, and I'm thrilled we get to go back to Derry. It is my favorite novel. I love the town, and the fact that we got to kind of take a really important part of Gwendy's story into Derry just made me endlessly happy. Every day going to work on that was a blast.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm gonna move on to a tweet you made, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Not gonna pretend. John Scheich.
No, it's Sheck. Rhymes with heck.
John Scheck.
Yeah.
All right, so he made an I didn't know that you wrote a screenplay for Black House that never got produced. Is there anything that you can tell us about that? Because the backstory of what he said was, you saved the guy's life. It sounds like, and that I just gotta hear that.
No, I mean John's. We grew up together in Edgewood. And then he went out to Hollywood and made big movies with. Tom Hanks and Gwyneth Paltrow and Harvey Keitel and all these great actors, and has had a great career. But just like a lot of Hollywood actors, you have, you're facing, rejection and being turned down for so many things. So you end up getting in that place where, you're unsure of yourself. And you're questioning yourself, and I think all John means by that is, I just always reminded him, hey, we're from Edgewood, man. We grew up working class town. We with a bunch of other good-hearted working class guys, and kind of fought our way up. So that's all he means. He's a very talented guy. But yeah, Black House was cool because we had. The very first script that John and I wrote together was an adaptation of From a Buick 8. And we came very close 3 or 4 times to getting that film greenlit. Once with Tom Hanks' company, Playtone, and a couple other times we had some genre directors. Tobe Hooper was attached to direct, and George Romero was attached, and he actually did I thought about this the other day. For some reason, when I was out working in the yard, freezing my ass off, I'm like, it was really cool. Romero was attached to direct, really cool phone call. And he actually did a rewrite on our script. And I have what is probably one of 2 copies of this, rewritten script by Romero sitting up in my office. And I'm like, I need to pull that down sometime. And I need to make sure I put it someplace safe so that when I'm not here anymore, my kids don't just like throw it in a dumpster somewhere. But the funny thing is I didn't read The Talisman for many, many years. I was just like, the same thing with Dark Tower stuff. I read all the other King stuff, and even though I was a Western fan and a King fan, for some reason, hearing stories about talking trains and all this other stuff from the Dark Tower series, I was like, I'm not even going to try. Finally, Frank Darabont, the director, actually, who I'd become friends with, he's the one who taught me to read the Dark Tower books, which I loved. The Talisman, it was Marcia, who was Stephen King's main assistant for a lot of years. She's the one who kept telling me, you need to read it, you need to read it. I read The Talisman, I loved it. Black House came out, and I was like, this sounds more like my cup of tea, serial killers, blah, blah, blah. But it didn't get read for a while. And I was down at the beach on vacation with my family and got a call from John. And he said, Akiva Goldsman just called our agent. And, Akiva, he wrote like Cinderella Man and A Beautiful Mind. He won like Academy Awards, and he's a huge producer. And he evidently read our Buick script, really liked it, and he wanted us to know if we were interested in adapting Black House. So of course I'm like, standing on the boardwalk with my kids and my wife, and I'm like, of course, yes, let's do it. I'm like, I know it's like a 900-page book, but I'm sure it'll be a piece of cake to get it down to 120-page script.
Oh my God, crazy
and
bastard!
By the way, John, I haven't read it yet. So all I remember is we spent the remainder of that day scouring Ocean City, Maryland used bookshops for a copy of Black House. And we finally found it, and I read that book in like 3 days. And John and I put our hearts and soul in it. I think we did a great job. And I'm usually very hard on us as a team when it comes to scripts. He was married to Christina Applegate at the time, and I just remember she used to laugh because we'd be sitting there at their dining room table, going over script notes and looking at our scripts. And I would always just say, John, this sucks. And she would just crack up, and she's like, how refreshing that is to hear in Hollywood. Someone just, admitting instead of blowing air up everyone else's ass. But we really did a good job. And we got a call from Akiva, and he did a 3-way call, and he was in Europe at the time working on one of the Da Vinci Codes with Tom Hanks. And this guy was like our god, because we're like, he's a huge Stephen King fan. He's done a lot of genre stuff, but he's done the big films too. And but I just remember we had a really nice phone conversation with him, and he said, I read it on the train, and I felt like I was sitting next to Stephen King. And I was like, I wrote that down on a piece of scrap paper so I wouldn't forget it. But ultimately, it didn't get made because of all that red tape with The Talisman. That was our job. He said, you have to write a script where even if, we can't get, the rights, or The Talisman hasn't been made by DreamWorks, Black House has to stand on its own. And I think we did that, but it still got tangled up in the red tape, and it just never happened. So that's par for the Hollywood course.
Yeah, sounds about right. So I want to take us back. When you started telling us the Gwendy story, you mentioned summer of '88, sending the first issue of Cemetery Dance. So walk us through how Cemetery Dance gets started.
I started the magazine during my last year. I was in College Park, Maryland. I was selling my own short stories to a lot of the smaller small press magazines, and it really was as simple as this. I remember, friends and family were excited for me. They're like, "Hey, Rich kind of got back to his writing roots, and he's selling his work, and this is exciting." And I trust me, no one was more excited than me. But then I would get my contributor copies in the mail, and at least 50% of the time, I remember I would pull it out of the envelope, and I would think, I can't show this to my parents because it was such a piece of crap. And I say that knowing full well how difficult it is to produce something of quality. But again, these were the mags that paid like a half a cent a word or just copies. Again, no regrets. I was happy to be selling to them, but the finished product just left something to be desired in a lot of cases. So it made me, again, I was young enough and dumb enough to think, I could do this, and I can do it better than this. So that's what I did. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just said, you know what? Let's do this. I knew what I liked, and I knew I liked that horror show mixture of fiction, nonfiction, reviews, interviews. So when you're talking about writing what you would want to read, this was exactly the case. I published exactly what I wanted to read, the kind of magazine that I wanted to pull out of the envelope. And yeah, so that's it. I opened up the summer of '88. I opened up for submissions, You know, did design the first magazine myself, which is why it looks hideous. One of my college roommates did the art right there, you know, on the spot. Did actual original art on the design pages. We printed it in the University of Maryland's computer lab, which had big signs that said, I think you were limited to printing, it's either 15 or 20 pages at a time, because, you know, there were people waiting to print. And I remember we printed, it was a 48-page first issue, and we needed 2 copies of it. So I remember we hit print on 96 copies and ran away. And when we came back to the computer lab, people were pissed. We're like, sorry, we didn't see it, sorry. So yeah, that's how the mag was born. It was born out of you know, equal parts like bravado and ignorance. It was, you know, all of it back then was really, honestly, you know, young and dumb enough to not be scared and just go forward. So that's how the business was born.
But you kept with it. I mean, obviously, here we are. Math is hard. 32 years later. So, I mean, how? What was it like to see it kind of catch on?
What was interesting is, you know, when I worked on that thing you know, like year 3 is when we started the hardcover books, and I was just in, you know, I mean, it was what I loved to do. I didn't make any money those first 10 years, and I worked insane hours. I worked probably, you know, 80. I got cancer when I was 29 and then 30, and my wife still swears that I worked myself into that. But to me, it was, you know, even though I was exhausted, and yeah, there were plenty of down days where, you know, I realized, you know, my God, you know, will this really ever, you know, take off? But I just genuinely loved so much what I was doing, and I couldn't picture myself doing anything else. So there was no fallback plan. Talk about no parachute. And the cool thing is, you know, the people who were important to me believed in me, so I didn't have those doubting voices. You know, I certainly didn't have them in my own head, except on the worst days. And my wife and my closest friends, and certainly my family, you know, they got it. You know, even though, well, you know, he's doing this weird magazine and he's publishing these books, and but they saw how hard that I was working at it, and they just, you know, they put all their support behind me. So yeah, it you know, to answer your question, you know, how was it to see? I guess that was my long-winded way of saying I didn't really see, even though all those successes were there, I didn't really start to see them until my 30s, after I came back from cancer and restarted everything again, and then I could really appreciate everything.
I don't think you can discount being surrounded by the right people too. Not necessarily, you know, yes people, but people who believe in you, who, if you want to, you know, say start a magazine, or if you want to try your hand at becoming a writer, becoming a publisher, becoming an editor, really and truly support you. Not necessarily financially, but just morally,
spiritually, and yeah,
exactly. You can't put a price on that.
No. I mean, I wrote about that in Chasing the Boogeyman, and my next in a book that's coming up this summer. But yeah, I mean, I had friends who I remember, you know, really clear, you know, a couple moments where a good friend of mine who's really talented, you know, his fiance, you know, and he was thinking about starting a small business. And I remember he's just like, nah, she wouldn't have it. She's just like this and this. And I remember just thinking how lucky I was and how different it was, because out of all the things I could have chosen to do, you know, to do this. And I mean, and even with my parents, you know, my dad was he was retired Air Force. He was a lifer in the Air Force, older gentleman. I mean, my dad fought in World War II. So I was like the youngest of 5, and kind of a mistake after the fact. You know, we very much had a typical, you know, father and son bump heads, you know, not communicate too well, a very loving relationship, but just not the most communicative or warm relationship until I probably hit 20 or so. And then, you know, I remember always thinking, so what's my dad going to think about? I got my degree in journalism from one of the best journalism colleges in the nation. I think it was ranked like 2 at the time. And I'm not only not going to use it, I'm not even going to put together a resume, because I'm just going to try to grow this magazine and sell my little stories. But he never, the thing is he saw how hard I was working, and he never. I mean, I talk about it in Boogeyman, where when the first issue came, he was right there next to me, helping me stuff envelopes and stuff. And yeah, I what you said is true for me, 100-fold. Without that backing and that kind of spiritual belief in me, I know I could have never done it, because there's too many dark days. There's too many days where you do something that you think's wonderful, and you send out, you stuff 1,000 envelopes because you bought somebody's mailing list with your last money in your bank account, and you bought the postage stamps and you put them on, and you think, well, this is going to bring back 5 times what I invested, and it just bombs. You make $27 and you're like, what next? So yeah, there's a lot of days like that in the beginning.
So Patrick, unless you have cemetery dance follow-ups, do you?
We could go in a million directions, but no, let's go wherever you're going. I got other questions that don't pertain to cemetery dance.
You mentioned chasing the boogeyman. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. So I am very interested to hear from you what this book is about, because I read the synopsis and everything, and it's described as metafiction. The main character is a person named Richard Chizmar. So tell me about this book.
It's me. Yeah, I don't make my life easy, do I? So after Button Box, I actually got an agent for the first time in like 15 years. I had 2 or 3 early on, in those first like 15 years. And then I didn't really need one. I had a film agent, and that was all. But after Button Box, I got an agent, and we kind of talked about a few different ideas that I would go to for that first big solo full length. And of course, I ditched them all, and I wrote this book without telling her. And it just kind of flew out of me. And it's, they're calling it metafiction because for some reason I made myself one of the main characters. I swear I'm not like, I don't have this big ego. I always tell people, I'm like, look, the proof's there. I never go to conventions. I don't have my own podcast, even though there's days I'd like to, because I think it'd be cool. I don't post my picture all over, the place. So it's not that. It's just, this is the way the story wanted to be told. And what it was, is, to give you a short version, it's, I kind of told you about when I started the magazine. When I graduated college, I was engaged to my wife now, Kara, and we were going to get married I graduated in the spring, and we were going to get married in January, only because, January, I look back and I'm like, what a weird ass time to get married. But it was because she was going into physical therapy graduate school. And we didn't have time for a honeymoon, and we just, we wanted to live together and, just make life easier. So instead of getting a place and spending money, spring I graduated, I moved back home to my parents' house for that spring, summer, and, fall and into the winter until we got married. And it was just a really interesting thing to be, there's no question at that point, you're a man, you're into adulthood, but you move home into your old bedroom, and you're looking out that window where you played marbles and wiffle ball and traded baseball cards as a kid under the weeping willow tree with your friends. And I write about it in the introduction to the book. I'm like, you can't help but see the ghosts of your childhood out there. And it just puts you in a different mind space. And at that time, in my little hometown of Edgewood, Maryland, there was someone who was breaking into houses at night, and he was touching women's hair and their legs and their arms while they were sleeping. And then they would wake up and he would flee. He would run out. And this happened like 20 times. And the newspapers called him the Phantom Fondler. And I always just remember thinking, I lived through something really interesting, because people were locking their doors. There were people who were scared. It was in the newspaper every week. And, people were buying, deadbolts and the whole thing. And I just always remember thinking it could have turned out so much worse. I mean, and I don't mean that to minimize what happened to these women, because it's terrifying. And they did eventually catch this guy in Baltimore City. But anyway, so that's where the story came from. I'm like, what if I was home, and what if more than just touching was going on while I was home? This horror guy who's got his own brand new horror business, who is selling horror stories. And what if he's, you know, if something is going on in his hometown that's like a story out of one of his books or one of the movies that he loves, and he becomes part of this story. And it was like a lightning bolt. And I remember thinking, as I'm writing it, people are really either going to like this and they're going to kind of, you know, dig the vibe of this story, or they're going to think, Rich, what the hell have you done? And fortunately, you know, even my agent, you know, I kind of had to win her over. And so, yeah, I don't know if that gives you enough of a description, but that's kind of how it's metafiction. It's this serial killer story mixed with a real sense of nostalgia. A film producer who's looking at it right now said it's The Wonder Years meets Silence of the Lambs.
Oh.
And I'm like, that's kind of right. You know, I'm like, that's kind of right. 'Cause that's the kind of neighborhood I grew up in, and it's a tougher place now. But yeah, I'll send you guys an arc when I get them.
That'd be awesome.
Which hopefully should be soon. And the only other thing I'd say about it, and is I'll shut up afterwards, is I love true crime books.
Yeah.
So that's how the story wanted to be told, was as if it was a true crime book that I had written back in, you know, 1988 when this story took place as a young, you know, 22-year-old or whatever I was. And then I came back because more happened to the story, you know, 2.5 decades later, and I came back and I wrote this lengthy new afterword. And that's what Chasing the Boogeyman is it's set up like a true crime book with like 50 photographs, and all my childhood friends are mentioned by name, and the dumb stuff we did is talked about in great detail in the beginning of the book, because I really wanted people to get a sense of this town and the people who live there. So yeah, you get to hear, you know, about our neighborhood haunted house and all the legends, and you know, my parents have been gone since, my mom's been gone since 2001, my dad since 2007, but for a couple months while I wrote this book, you know, they were alive again, and that was a cool thing. And it felt very self-indulgent at times, because I'm writing, you talk about just writing what pleases you, that was Chasing the Boogeyman. It was like, it was my childhood, and then my young adulthood, and my family was there, and my friends were there, and bad stuff was happening, and it was just a cool little, you know, exercise.
I'm sold. I love Thomas Harris's trilogy, because whenever I talk about this, I'm just stating the fact that I don't like the prequels, so that's why I say the trilogy. I love that, the Hannibal Lecter series, especially Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon. And the Wonder Years. Grew up on all the reruns as a kid. So you combine the two. I've never thought that anyone would say those two would go together and make a story.
Yeah, well, I liked when he said that description, because I didn't coin it, but I was like, yeah. And I saw, by the way, the Wonder Years, they're all on Hulu now, somebody told me.
Oh.
All you know, evidently the entire series. So I was on YouTube the other day watching some of my favorite scenes from Wonder Years. It's such a good show.
It really is. Brendan, you got any thoughts, man?
I was just going to say I'm very grateful for that description, because, you know, I went looking into it and I said, okay, this is fiction. But then I read the synopsis. I'm like, no, but is he writing about himself? Did Richard stop a serial killer when he was young? And we're going to hear about it. And then I saw the whole metafiction thing. I said, but no, there's pictures. And it really just brought me down this really interesting rabbit hole. I hope a lot of people who are listening are going to be intrigued by that synopsis, because I know I sure as hell am. And, you know, you said, oh, I hope this is, I hope people like it. To me, you're mixing, you know, horror fiction and true crime. And true crime is so big right now. I feel like that's just an absolute recipe for success.
Mm.
I hope so. I mean, you know, as a true crime fan, I always tell people this. I'm like, I'm one of those guys who, you know, if there's pictures and I'm reading about something happening to someone, I want to flip ahead and see the pictures, because I want to see the person's face. Mm. I don't, most true crime books, and I have to explain this to people who aren't big fans of the genre, but I'm like, you know, they don't have gory pictures. I mean, they might have like a crime scene picture, so you see a splash of blood or something, but, you know, most of the pretty mainstream ones are pretty PG rated, as they should be, and they handle the subject matter with grace. But I always want to see the faces. If they're describing a spot in the woods where something was found, I want to see that spot in the woods. So I'm hoping there's a photo in there, and that's where the ideas of the photos came from. Instead of being in one central photo section, they're scattered throughout the book. They're at the end of each chapter, so you can have that immediate visual link. And yeah, it's that's just where it came from. And my son, I wanted this to be like the full-on Blair Witch. I wanted people to read this book. My original title was just The Boogeyman: A True Story of Small Town Horror. Well, the publisher nixed that right away. It's like, number one, it's got to sound more like a true crime book. So they came up with Chasing the Boogeyman, which I really liked. They gave me several options, and they gave me complete freedom to come up with my own, and I couldn't. And they nixed the subtitle. And that's what I told them. I said, I want people to put the book down and not have a clue whether it's real or not. And they're just like, you just want to get sued. And that's what my son kept saying. He's like, you're going to drive down property values in your hometown. I'm like, the people who live in your parents' house, because I had the real address. They're like, the people who live in your parents' old house, the house you grew up in, are going to hate you. And I just remember telling them, I'm like, Billy, like 300 people might read this book. We don't really know because it hadn't sold yet. I'm like, I might be publishing this through CD as like a limited or something because my agent is telling me, Rich, you're crazy. But it didn't turn out that way. But yeah, I still have ideas to kind of Blair Witch it. I'd like to do some like documentary style book trailers and bring in some of the people who are in the actual pictures and shoot them like old time footage and have some of the reporters who were featured in pictures, doing interviews with bystanders and stuff. I think it'd be cool to do that.
Yeah, no, that'd be a really interesting way to do a book trailer too. True crime is an interesting subject because me and Brent have said this on a few episodes, but our wives are the same in the sense where they don't like horror, but they will eat the shit out of true crime, man.
Yeah, no, my wife's the same thing. Especially she just last night, she's like, well, I put on like that 20, whatever it's a pretty mainstream series, 20 for 20 or something like that. It's on like the Oprah network or something, reruns. And I see her, she'll come in from, the bathroom, brushing her teeth or something. And she sits on the edge of the bed and all of a sudden I see her eyes get focused and 10 minutes later, she's still there. And she's like, you cannot watch this stuff at night anymore because I get hooked and I need to go to sleep. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's true crime. It's a different animal.
The one that came out last year, I can't remember. Wow, I can't believe I forgot his name. But he was recently, I think, in Texas, killed his family. Found him in those containers for oil.
He killed his daughters and yeah.
That was the most fucked up one I've seen that I can remember to date.
Yeah, there's some scary ones, man. The Night Stalker one I just saw, which wasn't fantastic because it was a little too glitzy and it was like, they're usually pretty respectful and they don't kind of Hollywoodize, glamorize them. This one was like a little bit too music video-ish. Yeah. But that last episode where you really get these close views of Richard Ramirez and stuff, man, I was terrified. I'm like, this guy looks like what I think the devil looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'll Be Gone in the Dark on HBO and that's what's always fascinated me was the human monsters and I've written very little supernatural fiction because a reviewer once said you can tell he doesn't quite buy into it, and that was a long time ago. Because the thing is I'm a big chicken. I do believe. I'm like, yeah, I believe in spirits and demons and all that stuff. But I just can't quite. Up until recently, I don't think I could really write convincingly about it. But the human monster stuff, yeah, because I've always, like I said, I've always been that freak, kind of like, it looks like the Wonder Years neighborhood, but I don't know what kind of weird shit's going on behind those closed doors. That was me as a kid. Walking home, kind of telling my friends, I think Mr. So-and-so might be a serial killer. Like, why do you say that?
I'm pretty sure Kevin's older brother was a serial killer. That kid sucked.
Yeah, that was his path for sure.
So I got to ask you, I've never heard you say that you're at least interested in the idea of doing your own podcast. I think you'd be good at it. You got more than enough people that you could pick from to have on. Would that actually happen?
You know what? I don't know. My oldest son, Billy's, he's going to graduate from college this spring. And for a while, I had the idea that, yeah, maybe he'd come home and work with the old man for like a year or two and before he, started doing his own thing. And I thought, he could really help my business by, we talked about him like starting a YouTube channel for us and things like that. I don't know if that'll happen. He's a lot more, he wrote a novel this last summer when he was home, and I've actually spent the last couple months, in my free time editing the book for him. And yeah, I mean, he's way, way, way ahead of where I was. So he may just decide to go on his own path and do his thing, which is great. I'll support him whatever he does. But if you did decide to kind of, come in and help out and get on the payroll for a year or two, I think there's a chance. I just, put the camera like nice and far away from me, and so I can like just sit on a couch and slouch back in my office. And, I thought it would be cool because people always like to hear the behind the scenes stories, like about a lot of the things we've done. And I thought it would be neat at some point to take like the first 100 books we published and do a quick little like 5-minute snippet behind each book. And, I would like to do that because that's something I'd like to hear from other publishers, and I actually think it could be valuable to some people because, to hear me say, you know what, I love this book with my heart and soul, but I overpaid the artist and I hate the cover. But I was a rookie back then, so I didn't know how to not get talked into overpaying for something. And, just those kind of stories. I think would be a lot of fun. And then, like you said, I mean, I do know a lot of people, and I think I could get them to kind of come on and trust me and probably tell some good, funny stories too.
Well, Ron Kelly pointed something out to me because him and I talk frequently, and he said, and I'm not trying to come off like I'm bragging about me and Brennan, what we're doing, but he pointed out something where I thought, hey, that makes sense. We got Ramsey Campbell on last week, Jar Lansdale, him, and then Gabino and Brian. He said you're gapping generations, and they're talking about their past. And now I view him and I as basically archivists for this generation or people that are still alive of previous generations. It's fun, man, and it is valuable because I don't know what lessons someone could take away from it. That's how I see it. I mean, I'm like what we're doing now. I'm talking to you. You got a lot of knowledge and experience with big names to newer people. So I'd personally be a big fan of the shows. So I don't know. That's one fan you got.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever do it. If I do, I'm going to make you two come on and talk. Yeah, I mean, because I think about what we're doing here tonight, and I just think, you know what? Because they passed away too soon, there's no Charlie Grant on a podcast. There's no Rick Howdala, and there's a long list of guys like that who are no longer with us. And yeah, like you said, you're archiving kind of the heart and soul of the genre by talking to all these people. And yeah, I mean, I remember when my father was passing, thinking, God, I should have videotaped. I should have had him just sit down and tell me a bunch of his old World War II stories. Because he did some pretty amazing things and knew some pretty amazing people, and I would have loved to have those on film to watch over and over again.
I got one quick story that I really think you'd appreciate. Brennan might too. Is of all places, I was at a family member's funeral, and my great uncle Francis. He's no longer with us, but this was years ago. He was a World War II pilot. I don't know the exact not title, the exact position or rank. I don't even know the terminology that he held. I do know that he was in the Air Force, got shot down over enemy lines, and he was telling me and my father the story, and we're big history fans, love the History Channel and whatnot, and he was telling us, he's like, me and the guys I was with went from one location to another to get back, with our allies, and if we get caught, we're in Russia. We're in the middle of a war. We will get killed, or worse, we'll be tortured. And he said, at one part, I saw this mother and this kid get hit by a truck. The truck stopped a few feet away, got out, pulled out a gun. The mom came out, screamed like, obviously stop or whatever, and he shot the mom, and the kid was dying, so he drove off, and no one did anything, and he couldn't do anything.
Right.
These aren't stories I'd ever think of, and it's never left my head. And you hear that story, Brennan hears that story, listeners hear it. We're all imagining the same basics of it, but the mind plays crazy. It'll paint a crazy image from hearing that alone. Like, I can't imagine that. You see someone kill a mother and the kids lying there dead. Like, that's horrible.
Yeah, all just yeah, what they live through, and when they talk about, what's the what do they say? I'm forgetting, the phrase they coin about our finest generation, or what's the words I'm thinking of that I'm not
I think it's
saying.
the greatest generation.
The greatest generation. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the things that they did back then, and they were young, and they volunteered to go do this, and yeah, I just, like with Band of Brothers, I still say that's the best television I've ever seen,
Mm.
because they really do put you there. And I just, I remember talking to my dad a lot, and my uncle. And my dad, he served in Europe and also the Pacific during World War II. And yeah, we have all the old souvenirs and photographs that he took of you know the trenches there on Okinawa, then the caves and stuff. And yeah, just yeah, I just, again, as a creator, I often would put myself in those positions, and I'd be like, nah. When I was 22, my mom was still cooking me dinner because there before I got married, and then when we got married, I was ordering delivery from like Domino's. And so yeah, to be thinking of myself in some filthy trench and at the Battle of the Bulge, freezing my ass off, I'm like, first thing I'd be like, where do I use the bathroom? They'd be like, right here, dumbass.
Yeah, man. Think of any battle. I mean, it's fucking terrifying. I remember the first R-rated movie I ever went to was with my father. And it was in 2001, Enemy at the Gates. Jude Law.
Great movie.
I I hesitate to say it's my favorite war movie because there's so many good ones, and Saving Private Ryan, feel like that has to be my favorite. But there's so many good ones I can't decide. But Enemy at the Gates, for those that have not seen it, phenomenal. Vasily Zaitsev, and he's a Russian sniper that takes on Ed Harris, German sniper, and
Yeah.
that scene where the kid's being hung, I'm a kid watching another kid, and I know it's a movie getting hung, but I got fucking chills, man, and I still do.
I bet I've seen that movie 10 or 12 times, because it like comes on HBO or Cinemax and
Yeah,
or Showtime, and I'm laying there in bed, and yeah, that's one of those. That's one of those. Can you change channel until I fall asleep from my wife? Because it's like, it's loud, but that movie's amazing. Yeah, everything about that. The sets on that movie, of the rubble and the buildings and the
yeah.
little crevices that they shoot through and all that is just amazing.
And just one more comment on that movie is my favorite part. I think that sticks out at least right now is when he first. I think it's his first kills, and he's seeing the guys just talking, the ranking officers, and with each bomb going off, takes out another guy, and you're like, all right, this is
It's
gonna
like
be
hiding
good.
in that fountain or something. That
Yeah,
dry
yeah,
fountain
yeah.
behind that little, yeah. And the other guy comes up and joins them. Yeah, yeah. No,
Fantastic.
that's there's like 20 favorite scenes in that whole thing when they cross the river or whatever in the beginning, and
Yeah,
they're just getting slaughtered. I'm like, oh my god. Yeah, good stuff.
yeah. And
I was a major when I was a kid. I was all about scary movies and war movies and westerns. I tell my kids, I'm like, you would get the TV guide, and I would mark what I wanted to see on the calendar. So I made sure I could either bargain ahead of time. If it was a nighttime movie, I could bargain with my parents ahead of time so that I could stay up late on a school night and watch it. And if it was on the weekends, they hated it because, like I said, I'd be right in the middle of, like, pitching baseball cards or doing this or that. And I'd be like, I got to go, so and so's on. So yeah, those were my thing. And those were the first stories I wrote when I was like 7 or 8. They were all
Oh,
war stories and monster stories.
interesting.
Yeah.
I can relate there too because my papa, my dad's father, he was a World War II Navy boy, and what he liked were westerns. He liked, John Wayne, in particular. A movie that I mean, a show that I started liking because of my father was The Rifleman. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's kind of silly now because of there's no like violence the way there should be, but at the same time, it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it. Whatever takes your imagination. I was convinced. I was like fascinated by George Custer and the Seventh Cavalry and all that stuff. And still to this day, I'm hard to shop for. So every Christmas when my sisters start badgering me, what do you want for Christmas? I always throw out the same thing just to mess with them. I'm like, I'm still waiting on my 7th Cavalry full size, replica uniform. They're like, Rich, we're not getting you that. I'm like, all right, well then get me the Elvis Ryan studded jumpsuit. They're like, Rich, we're not getting you that. So, but yeah, now when I was young, I remember going to the library and just reading as much as I could about Westerns in the West. And, you're young. So, back then I was all about how, the cavalry were the good guys and the Indians were the bad guys. And then, you grow up and you're like, son of a bitch,
I was tricked.
Yeah.
The History Channel is a great, it is part Western, a great mini series called The Men That Built America. And then they got a prequel, The Men That Built America, Frontiersmen. And it covers, the Western expansion and how California and all the West Coast states were won. I'm sure there's books about them, fictional books, but I haven't seen any recently, and I'd love to read about those guys. I'm going to move on to some questions. Well, this is the only set of questions that we got. He goes by the Book Dad. His name's Andrew, and he said, sorry, I thought I had them. Here they are. He said, I want to get Chizmar's thoughts on promoting an author's Amazon profile and the benefits of it. I noticed with his new book, he does a lot of promotions surrounding Amazon and pre-orders. So that's the first one.
You know what? I'm kind of feeling my way around. And that's the interesting thing with, with Chasing the Boogeyman, we sold it for a decent chunk of money to Simon & Schuster, to Gallery Books. And kind of for the first time, I feel like I'm working for someone else. And I feel like, okay, there's certain things I will do for a book that I'm publishing on my own, or, Subterranean Press might be publishing it, or Gauntlet or someone. It's a specialty press book. There's kind of only so much you can do. And usually those books don't have, the big 8-9 month waiting period that I've had with Boogeyman. So I've really kind of went into it with the idea of, okay, I really want to promote this book to the indie stores, like my local bookstore, which I've been I actually just sent out a bunch of stuff on social media tonight for them, but I also want to make sure that I'm logging these traditional sales through Amazon and the Barnes and Noble and the traditional bookstores, because I want the numbers to look promising for Simon & Schuster and for them to feel like they made a good investment in me. So it's weird, because I do feel like after all this time I'm working for someone else. So that's where these promotions are coming from, and the idea that let's figure out what works and what doesn't work. So, with some of the stuff we've been doing on like Facebook for Amazon, we've just been kind of targeting, readers who are interested in both true crime and Stephen King. We did one that was specifically for the state of Maryland and used the ad that talks about a small town in Maryland to see how that does. And my philosophy is, I have a feeling sometimes people think, well, he's doing some stuff that are probably, he's been on the New York Times bestseller list. He was on the USA Today list with his own book and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm not sure he needs to even do some of these, kind of smaller scope things. But I'm like, man, that's how I built my business, is just kind of covering every little nook and cranny. And it's fun. I think it's fun to kind of get out there and try things. That's always been the key to our success, is I've never been afraid to fail or look dumb. I'm like, man, I can't count the times I've done it. I just get up and keep going. So, with this promotional stuff, I kind of go in with the same mindset, and I've used this, kind of description a few times, and I always feel like, it's a little corny, but it really fits. And it's like, I'm still that kid sitting on the corner of Hanson and Tupelo Road selling cups of lemonade for $0.25 a cup. But now I'm selling books. And if I can get out there and hustle, some books from my publisher, and, this appearance or this ad campaign, might sell 450 advanced copies. This one might only sell 6. But you know what? As long as you're reaching readers, and you never know who's going to be in that 6, that, it might be a guy who turns it on to his book club, and there's another 20. And then I kind of just look at it as, hey, I'm fortunate to be in this position. So, let's bust my ass and try to make it a success for my publisher.
I'm really glad that you said that because not I don't want to speak for me or Brendan, but maybe if I was a newer writer and I hadn't heard from more seasoned writers, I might think that once you reach a certain point, you don't have to work so hard. But I've heard the opposite for, agents or publishers. Like if you aren't hustling, they're not seeing any results, they're probably going to be looking for someone else to represent a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think, unless you're at that huge upper tier, and even the Steve Kings and the Harlan Cobens and those guys, they're still out there doing appearances from time to time when they have a new book, and they're still doing things that they'd probably prefer not to be doing, but that's out of respect to their publisher and their readers. And yeah, I mean, especially in the really quality specialty presses, smaller presses, where you can still sell 4,000 or 5,000 copies of a book if you work. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the author participation makes all the difference, and I think you kind of owe it to that publisher to do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if they've got that guy to go with, or they've got the guy who's gonna kind of just sit back and not say a word and kind of give that sideways glance to the readers and the press, then yeah, you go with the guy who's going to get out and work and hustle for you.
Yeah, because I've kind of like studied just being on Twitter for so many years that the authors that do the most engagement kind of get the most feedback, which makes sense. You do something and you get a result back. The ones that have a big following don't have a lot of people actually engaging in them, and I mean, to me, that says, well, it's probably gonna be the same thing for when your book's on sale or your new book's coming out. Less people are interested if you're not engaging and actually talking to them.
Yeah, I mean, I had to be dragged into social media, kind of kicking and screaming by everyone at my office. They're like, Rich, we're all on there. They would, and I used to there was a couple bulletin boards back when those were more popular. They were message boards, not bulletin boards.
Yeah.
I'll show you. I'm a techno idiot, by the way. I still have an AOL address and the whole thing. But yeah, I used to follow a couple of those message boards, and I was fascinated. I loved them. And people were like, "Well, why don't you ever post?" And I'm like, I finally admitted to one day, I'm like, I don't even know how to register for the thing, man. I'm like, it's probably better I don't, because I'm liable to get on there and say something stupid. But when I did get dragged onto social media, I just ended up having my eyes open, because between meeting, guys like you and also readers and people with like-minded interests, and then reconnecting with my old friends, I was like the poster boy for like, this is what Facebook is all about. But I really enjoyed it, and people, have had their horror stories, and I'm like, I can count the people on one hand that I've had to block over the years. Um, I've been lucky that I've had really good groups of people, who I've talked with on there, and I also have thick skin, so if somebody wants to say something bad, they can. And I usually feel bad because if somebody comes on and like drops a smart ass comment, there's usually like 50 people who are like jack the guy up, and I'm like, yeah, it's okay, I'm fine with it, you know. But yeah, I've been fortunate, and you're right. I mean, the fact that they like to interact, and somebody busted me like 2 weeks ago. They're like, why do you say thank you at everyone? I'm like, because I'm fucking polite. I'm like, my books, man, they're like putting $20 or $25 or $8 for a paperback or whatever. I'm like, that's, again, man, I am the kid who walked around with a paperback in his back pocket and thought maybe one day I'll be a writer. So to be able to do it and have, to start having some success, and like we talked about, be able to write with your hero, and I just, there are no days that I take it for granted. So I know how lucky I am. I'm appreciative of it, and I'm still, I've still got the big eyes, and I'm excited by it all. So yeah, somebody goes on there and says, hey, I just pre-ordered your book. You know what? That's my natural response is, thanks, man. That is awesome, and I hope you like it.
You live by a mantra. Said that weird. You live by a mantra that, did I say that right? I keep saying trip. Yeah. You live by the same one that I do, man. It's my dad told me ever since I was a kid, don't ever forget your roots wherever you end up. And because my roots were very family oriented, you treat people with respect. You are upfront and honest. and you're you. You don't change for other people. You just kind of live your true life, and I see it in you. I see it in. I could list so many other people, and those are my favorite kinds of folks. Even successful filmmakers like Kevin Smith. I mean, he seems like a good guy. I don't know him, but
Yeah, you can usually recognize the people who kind of, they're not fake, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, yeah, I can't fake. If we could be at some stuffy, presentation dinner or something. If the guy next to me farts, I'm gonna laugh. I'm sorry. That's just me. And you know what? Chances are, if you hear 5 other guys laughing in that room, they're all my buddies, because that's just, and that, yes, that's a juvenile example, but it is what it is. And yeah, I have the same thing. I mean, and that what's funny is you talk about, you don't forget your roots, and it's like, this is not an advertisement, but it's like you say that, and I think, well, you know what? That's what Boogeyman is for me. That's what Chasing the Boogeyman is. It's my roots, and it's kind of like how I ended up doing what I'm doing. And it's all right there in the book, and that's why I'm doubly excited. Somebody might guess who the killer is, or somebody might this or that, but in a way it doesn't matter, because it's kind of my Tom Sawyer book, where it's just like, you know what, here's a lot of my adventures from my youth, and I finally had an excuse to share them. And there's some pretty gross stuff in there that my friends did, and people are going to be like, Rich, what made you think to put that in there? I'm like, because I was there, I saw it.
Brendan, I got one more comment and then jump in. I've been talking long enough, but I don't know if you're fan. Do you like South Park at all, Rich?
Oh my. Yeah, my son just showed me the pandemic special before he left for Maine yesterday.
Yeah.
And on Sunday, before the Super Bowl, he showed me the pandemic special, and I said, what? There's no other series on television where I will say Jesus Christ or holy shit more than watching South Park. I'm like, there's so many things where I'm like, how? I'm like, Billy, it is literally like me and you at our worst and most politically incorrect, and they're just putting our thoughts on screen.
I'm right there with you. When the movie came out, it's me and a group. I was like in the 8th grade or something like that, and me and a group of kids played travel basketball. I think we were actually in Maine. I don't remember which part, but I'm from Massachusetts, so we were traveling throughout New England. And it was me and all the guys, and the parents were together, and we were just in a hotel room watching that movie. I love it. But I bring it up because my son, I got one son right now, one kid. His name's Philip. Not because of South Park, but I got a little brother, and I said, when you get a kid, if he's a boy or a girl, name them Terrence. and he's like, all right. I'm like, our wives won't think it's funny, but we will.
So a lot of other people. Yeah, no, that's great.
See, yeah. You're very short with, and I don't mean that in an angry way, but you're kind of to the point on social media. So this is awesome, man. Like I already liked you, but this is a new side to you. Brennan, go ahead. Take it away. I'm waffling on.
No, I was just going to say, the moment that I don't find a loud fart in a crowded room funny, I'll be ready to hang it up. It's the peak of comedy. It's,
It is.
Farts are funny.
I don't understand people who don't think it's funny. Guys, girls, it's a different thing, whatever. But still, if you're a guy and you don't think it's funny, then chances are, we're not going to get along. It's funny, social media, because my wife will still bust me all the time. She's like, yeah, there's people on social media think you're a saint, and they think you're this. And I'm like, well, I can't exactly go on social media and, and talk about how I showed my kids how to light a fart. I can't. I can say that here, or I can say that if I'm doing a phone interview or something. But it's like, I don't want to interrupt someone's day with this tweet out of nowhere about how, hey, by the way, if you want to see this.
That's hilarious. Yeah. The first time I meet Rich, I'm going to just make a fart sound, and that's how we'll first meet.
Yeah, and if we're somewhere where where we're supposed to be quiet, then I'll be the guy doing that like hyperventilating laugh and tears coming out of my eyes, and trust me.
So. All right, Andrew had one more question. That was a long way to answer the question, Gav Track, so I hope we do that with this one. He said, also, does he have any suggestions on how to build an email list? Before you answer that, I just want to plug his newsletter. It's horror newsletter, spelt like it's sound.com/signup.
Andrew's asking that, like how to build up an email list for his.
Yeah, he's curious if you have any suggestions on how to build an email list for like a newsletter.
Some of the more basic ones, just, run some contests, email a guy like me and say, hey, do you have a couple books you can give away? I want to give away, and I'll make sure I, promote you for a week or whatever. There's a ton of people who I think would do that. Come to someone like me and say, hey, would you donate a $25 gift card to Cemetery Dance and give that away? You say, hey, whoever joins the newsletter over the next week, and all existing, members of the newsletter are going to be, entered into this. People like that stuff. I love doing it. I like, people are like, why do you give away this Stephen King books, or why do you give away this, gift edition or whatever? I'm like, man, it makes people happy.
I love your giveaways, man.
It makes people happy, and again, it's corny, but the fact, and I've said this out loud, I'm like, the fact that everybody kind of is jazzed for whoever the winner is. I don't get too many people who are, they joke about it, but I don't get too many people who are just like, fuck you, Rich. I've tried 8 times. I'm just like, all right, sorry. But yeah, you know what? It makes people happy, and especially over the last year where people need, something to get excited about. So that's one thing. Give stuff away. People dig that, and in the end, you'll end up having more fun with that than the people who are winning it. I really believe that. The other thing is the advice that I used to always give to like magazine publishers, just search every nook and cranny, post what they're going to get if they sign up for your newsletter, and do it everywhere. Do it in the smallest places. That's something that helped Cemetery Dance grow in the beginning. Is I gave away a lot of copies of the magazine. I sent them free to people like Stephen King and Peter Straub and Joe Lansdale, and trust me, those guys weren't going to subscribe to some fledgling little magazine that was just starting out. But that I used to call it my VIP list, because it was the guys I grew up reading. That list, it existed, the first 20 years of the magazine. I just, I always wanted to make sure I put a copy in front of them. That's kind of hard for him to do with a newsletter, but it's not hard to search every nook and cranny and post it all over. Again, if I had social media back then, I probably would have worked myself to death, because it was, kind of the sky's the limit. Instead, there were only like so many mailing lists I could rent and stuff envelopes and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, tell him he can drop me a note. I'll donate something, and just keep at it. That's the big thing. Longevity, that people have often said to me, how did you earn, the trust of a Stephen King or a Peter Straub? And I'm just like, right from the beginning, I think they saw that I was passionate. They heard it in my voice. And they knew it. I said, but even then, there are people out there who are good, well-intentioned, and they don't follow through. I said, I think it was, year 5 and then year 10 where they kind of realized this, he really is too dumb to go away and start selling something else to make money. He's here for the long haul, and he's doing it for the right reasons. And I think things like that, you can't measure the value there. So yeah, just keep pushing it and be aggressive, and without being a pain in the ass. And the other thing you could do is ask authors to promote it for them, put that in their newsletters, or hit it through their mailing list. Twitter's great because, you got that retweet thing. So you say, hey, just retweet this tweet and join my mailing list, and you're in the raffle, and I'm going to give you cool stuff.
Andrew, follow through with that, man. He will be listening to this, so follow through with that advice, sir. Brennan, do you have anything that you'd like to jump to now, sir?
Actually, I wanted to plug Andrew real quick. And, we mentioned that you can follow him on Twitter @TheBookDad. He's doing this really neat thing, and I don't know if it's just relegated to this month, but he started up a merchandise shop selling kind of indie horror T-shirts and gear and things like that. And apologies to him if I screw this up, but I believe he's putting all the proceeds towards some sort of, I can't think of a better word than scholarship, to, donate towards a woman horror writer to get a professional edit on their book, to get a cover on their book, to promote their stuff, basically however they want to use it. It's really kind of a neat idea that he came up with, and
That's cool.
worth support,
Well,
definitely.
I would certainly see, and that's something I would certainly retweet if he said, "Hey, blah blah blah," and that's the cool thing with, again, and I've been fortunate that the people that have kind of circled my social media accounts, they're actually really active. They like to interact, verbally on the different threads, and they support people. And I know a lot of times I recommend other people's books, and they're, I get these tweets back, ordered. I just put it on reserve, and I'm like, that is cool. Just have people who are willing to kind of support, other creators out there.
You know what? I had a similar moment today like that where I was just like tweeting about two women writers that I'm reading at the moment, and they both commented on it. And the first one was like, "Hey, I'm gonna order her book," and then the other one was like, "I'm actually ordering your book too." I was like, "This is what it's all about."
Yeah.
It makes everyone happy.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. That's, again, that's, I always feel like, all right, they're gonna be there goes Chizmar being cheesy again, but it's like, that's the cool thing about it is and like I said, I was never a big convention goer, but the handful that I did force myself to go to, I always came back like re-energized, and I'm like, this is great. I met so many cool people, and then of course it took 6 years to drag me out to go to the next one, and I came back. My wife makes fun of me. She's like, then you come back and you're saying the same thing again. This was awesome. I need to go to more of these, and then it's 4 more years, and so now, with these kind of things, with these podcasts, and that's the other thing, if I ever did something like that myself, is it would be cool to get, a bunch of people on there at the same time, and just kind of be able to, there's a lot of cool stories out there to hear. And there's a lot, I always feel like there's a lot of unique opportunities that come out of getting a bunch of people like that talking. Somebody else starts writing, or somebody says, you know what, I'm going to start my own little, online bookstore. People kind of energize and inspire people. So, yeah, good stuff.
The roundtable episodes have been my favorite. Last week, like I said, with Joe R. Lansdale, Gabino Iglesias, Sina Pelayo, and S.A. Cosby. That was just a blast. Me and Brennan barely talked.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Joe R. Lansdale's got he started off, I'm pretty sure, like, fuck the reader, I write for mayor.
I used to talk to Joe on the telephone when I was starting out, and when I was publishing his books, like, year 4 and 5 and 6. And I just remember I would talk to Joe, and he was so engaging, and he would talk for so long, and we'd be on the phone, and the UPS guy would come, and he would talk to him for a minute, and then he'd come back, and then the postman would come, and he'd come back, and I just remember, man, this guy can talk, but everything he says is interesting. And I'm like, what the hell is he writing? Yeah, a really interesting guy, and an inspiring guy. I love the stories of Joe's start, and kind of how he has always just stuck to his guns.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? That's just one guy. We not to keep coming off like we're really trying to get you to start that podcast. Although, like you said, you got 2 listeners already. There's no competition per se with the whole indie horror genre podcast thing, because there's just so many stories to tell, so many people to talk to, and so many ways to go about it.
Right.
There's always room for one more. If you've got, well, again, if you've got an idea for the stories you want to hear.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, people used to say that to me about the magazine and the book business, is like, you're always willing to share and give advice and blah blah blah. And you don't feel like it's a competition, and I'm just like, you know what, no, man, because I want more stuff to pull out of my mailbox and read. And I'm like, so the more people who do this and do quality stuff and do stuff that would be of interest to me, the better.
Look at it.
Yeah, there's no, none of us are going to grow that big where, you kind of have to feel like you need everybody. It's silly.
Yeah. I mean, look at Stephen King. It's not even an opinion anymore. He's the biggest author in the world, and he constantly promotes so many people. He doesn't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the neat thing is he's 70 something years old. He's writing his ass off still. And he's still going out his way to, it's not just about, donating money, which is a big deal, but hey, once you have it, you're supposed to give some of it away. Even your accountant will tell you that. It'll make your tax forms look better and all that stuff. That's not why he and Tabby do it. They're good people. But the stuff he does on Twitter, like you said, recommending other people's books and all that stuff is pretty amazing. And the people who really know Steve will tell you, he is a very generous, kind-hearted, smart as hell guy. And the fact that he's 70 and is still 70 something is just doing all this stuff to the extent that he does it is amazing, And that was the cool thing writing this book with him, is I actually get, every once in a while I get a tweet, Rich, you having fun? I'm like, yeah, hell yes, I'm having fun. But I think he's, kind of similar mindsets, which is just, make sure you're having a good time with what you're doing too, because you're going to do better work that way. And I understand it's not always like that. You got to write when you got the flu, and you got to write deadline, and sometimes you got to write for a shitty contract or whatever, or no contract because you're waiting. But again, when you've got all the money in the world in the bank and you've already accomplished so much, to keep going at it like none of that stuff is there is pretty admirable.
He's the Tom Brady of authors. I just had to say it.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell him you said that, but I texted with him often through the Super Bowl, and at some point he's like, "Are you rooting for the Chiefs?" And I'm like, "No, you know what? I'm really not." And I'm like, "But you got to understand, it still hurts me to root for Tom Brady." I said, "It hurts a little, man." And he just wrote, sent me back a laughing emoji or something.
Mahomes he's the future, man. Unless he gets seriously injured, he's the fucking future of the NFL.
Yeah, and he had no chance in that game. That wasn't about him. He just, I don't care who you were. I'm like, Lamar probably would have broke a couple runs because they were rushing. Mahomes blinked and he was 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage sometimes.
Yeah.
His life. And I'm like, a couple times I'm like, well, you know what? Lamar probably could have got out of that and gained some. I'm like, but he would have had no better luck throwing the ball than Mahomes. It was ugly. I felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
Because they actually, somebody actually did the math on this. They said that Mahomes ran for over 500 yards just running away from defenders behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Legitimately, not even exaggerating.
It was like some of those backyard games where you just you look at your friend and he is running as fast as he can in the opposite direction so he doesn't get killed. And I'm like, and then Mahomes would like spin, he would like pivot and horizontal to the ground, throw a strike that gets dropped, and you're just like, this is a nightmare. He literally thinks he's still sleeping.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So let's go to what are you reading right now? Let's start with Rich.
I just finished. What's the title? It's Clay McLeod. I can't. I think that's his last name. Whisper. Oh, you know what? You guys go first. I'm gonna look it up.
Brennan, what? You know what? I never go first, so I'll do me. I am finishing up. I got a few, and I'm actually gonna cheat and go on my Goodreads so I don't fuck up titles. Even though I should know them. No one's prepared here. So currently, right now, what I am reading. All right, I'll start with this one. I just started this yesterday. It's an audiobook. We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. I like it. I hate the dad in it. Total scumbag, but I think that's the point. Another book, one of those two female authors I was talking about, is by Dongji Gam Bepko. It's the book is called Glass Slipper Dreams Shattered, and it's just a bunch of flash pieces, about 60 pages long. It's pretty powerful stuff. There's 2 more books. I'm finishing up Clementine's Awakening by Jennifer Southey. Came out through Silver Shamrock and through a newer publisher, Off Limits Press, run by Samantha Koyesnik. Speaking of true crime, have you read that book, True Crime?
No, I haven't. I have it. I just actually got it maybe like 2 weeks ago.
It's fucking good, man. It's one of the best books I read of last year. Rich Chizmar has left to get the book. I hope Sam is.
Only because it's sitting right behind.
Yep.
See it?
Yeah, I hope Sam is listening to this episode because Rich just held your book up. That's very cool. So I'm reading her publishing company, Off Limits Press. Highly recommend that. publisher. If you're looking for a new publisher to read their books, Heart Strange and Dreadful. It's by Tim McGregor, which comes out this Monday, I think. Is it this Monday, Brennan?
It's I want to say it's the 15th, which I don't believe is Monday.
Yeah, okay. It comes out the 15th of this month.
Comes out next week.
It's neat. It's just, it takes place in the early 1800s in Rhode Island. Guy comes to town on a horse, and the horse is not doing so hot. The guy's not doing so hot either, and a lot of bad shit happens. So I think that's the spoiler-free synopsis. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
light.
All right, what are you reading there, Brian?
I am reading. See, now I forgot. I thought I was prepared. I'm reading In Darkness, Shadows Breathe by Catherine Cavendish. Really cool. I've read a lot of her books, especially her Flame Tree stuff, and I think this is my favorite so far. It's got this like attitude of paranoia that runs throughout. I'm like halfway through, and I have no idea what's going on, but like in that good way, where you don't know what's happening, but you're drawn into it. So I'm excited to finish that, and I'm reading Hayward's Revenge by Kaylin Lloyd. This is the third in a series, and I love this author. She's a composer, guitarist, and author from Wisconsin, I believe, and she has this kind of lore, I guess. She calls it like her Elders series, and it's these 3 immortal guys that are kind of spread throughout the world, and the trilogy is just kind of smaller, usually paranormal related stories that bring these guys in to deal with these paranormal situations, but from like an almost cosmic-y standpoint.
That sounds good.
I'm reading, Rich.
There, I just finished reading. It's Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. Really good. It's kind of the satanic panic back in the 80s, mixed with, kind of comes back to haunt this guy in present day. And his last book before this, his previous book was called The Remaking, which was just as good. I don't even want to give a description because it'll give it away. But I just discovered this guy probably in the last year, maybe 9 months, and everything I've read from him is wonderful. But Whisper Down the Lane will be out in, let's see, it'll be out in April. But I just read the arc, and next up I'm gonna. People are going to say he's bragging, but I'm going to read Billy Summers from King, which is not due out until August, but I got an early scoop. So his book comes out 2 weeks before mine. So it'll be kind of neat to, be in the bookstores with him. But so he gave me an early peek at that. That's next.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I saw Billy Summers maybe I'm slow, but I saw it last week, I think. I don't know. Time doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it piqued my interest. We kind of covered this, but what are you currently working on? I mean, is there anything else, or did we already cover it? You're working on a lot. I know that.
Yeah, no, you know what? You've kind of covered everything. I mean, I don't have – those are the big things that I have lined up. It'll be an interesting – from August until next February, having those 2 books come out will be an interesting time. And, as for what's next, I don't know. I might write a sequel to Boogeyman. Because it's definitely there if I want to.
Ooh.
And I've got a couple other ideas that are kicking around. I'm finishing up a script right now and some other stuff. So we'll see. I mean, Billy and my son and I we're going to write the sequel to Widow's Point, which was the Haunted Lighthouse story we did. And, I was hoping we would do that over this long break because he had come home for Thanksgiving break and stayed the whole time. But he had other stuff going on. I had other stuff going on. So instead, I edited his book, which, like I said, hopefully he's got another pass or 2 to do on it, and then hopefully he'll get out there and sell it next summer.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, hey, where can people follow you?
I'm on Instagram, and I don't know what my thing is. Just Richard. I think there's like an underscore in there somewhere. And I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter. Those are my things. And I've actually got a website that people put together for me and did an awesome job. So richardchizmar.com. And I'd like to start doing more there. You know, I think that'd be a cool place to kind of have, you know, whether it's like a little blog or, you know, something that I can kind of just keep people up to date. And, you know, I love the idea of, you know, you have this random thought and it's worth 300 words, throw it down, whether people want to read it or not, leave it up to them and, you know, go on. Same thing with like photographs and stuff. I think it'd be cool to have a section just to do that.
Nice. 4 final thoughts. Audio listeners, I'm wearing a shirt that says, I think you guys can see it, Black Hills Press by Shane Hawk. He's a indigenous writer, has this one book out called Anoka. More to come later this year from him, but check him out. ShaneHawk.com/merch. You'll find some very cool shirts there. I plan on buying some more myself. Brennan, any final thoughts on your end?
No, I think we got it.
Richard, any final thoughts on your end?
No, I'm good, man. Thank you guys for asking me on. I had a blast. I haven't talked that much in a while.
We're really appreciative of your time, man, and thank you so much for coming on. And anyone that is curious for who's next after this episode, we got Tim McGregor. He'll be on the following Monday from this episode. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you, listeners. Appreciate you as always.